Is faith just a crutch, or is it the very bedrock of Buddhism? A path that even the Buddha himself couldn't bypass? Let's tear into this right now. Without faith, can you truly walk the path to liberation, or are you just philosophizing in a vacuum? I'm speaking as a lifelong advocate of the Buddhist teachings, a senior who's weathered life's storms with the Dhamma as my compass. I've sat under ancient banyan trees in meditation, felt the weight of doubt, and seen faith bloom in the hearts of skeptics across Europe and America. So, let's unravel this together. Faith in Buddhism isn't what you think, and I've got the scars and stories to prove it. Now hold on, before you dismiss faith as blind dogma, let me ask you something sharper. Have you ever trusted a path without seeing the destination, not because someone told you to, but because your gut screamed it was right? That's where Buddhism's faith, Saddha in Pali, starts. It's not about swallowing doctrines without question. It's a trust in the Buddha's enlightenment, a confidence that the Tathagata, the perfectly enlightened one, cracked the code to end suffering. I've seen this firsthand in a small meditation center in Oregon, where a young man fresh out of a corporate burnout sat cross-legged for the first time. His face was a map of cynicism, until days of silent practice shifted something. He wasn't believing, he was tasting trust, a quiet nod to the Buddha's promise of liberation. This isn't Sunday school faith, it's a gritty, lived conviction. So, where does your trust lie right now? Blindly in ideas or in something you've started to feel? Let's dig into what faith means on this path, because it's not a fluffy concept. It's a tool sharp as a monk's razor. Saddha, or Shraddha in Sanskrit, is one of the 5 spiritual faculties in Buddhism, alongside energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. The Buddha described it as trust in the Tathagata's enlightenment, calling him an arahant, perfectly enlightened, accomplished in true knowledge and conduct. This isn't blind, it's a starting point. Think of it like trusting a doctor who's healed thousands before you. You don't need to see their diploma to take the first pill. I remember a retreat in the English countryside, where a woman in her 40s, a scientist no less, scoffed at faith as irrational. But when we unpacked Saddha as confidence in a tested path, much like her trust in peer-reviewed studies, she paused. Over 10 days, her meditation logs showed a pattern. Initial resistance, then small breakthroughs in calm, then a reluctant admission that trusting the process opened doors logic alone couldn't. That's Saddha's seed. Trust in the Buddha's realization, not as dogma, but as a hypothesis you test with every breath. But Saddha isn't static. It's a journey from shaky belief to unshakable confidence. The Buddha warned against amulika, rootless, blind faith, and pushed for avarata shraddha, a trust rooted in personal experience. Let's break this down with a story from a friend in Berlin, a former punk rocker turned meditator. He started with blind faith, parroting sutras because his girlfriend dragged him to a sangha. That's amulika, unrooted like a plant with no soil. But over months, sitting through knee pain and racing thoughts, he felt glimmers of peace during vipassana. By year's end, he wasn't chanting because he should. He trusted the practice because it worked. That's avarata shraddha, faith grounded in lived truth. The Buddha himself laid out 5 shaky ways people cling to belief: mere upbringing, saddha as habit, liking an idea, rusi, hearsay, anasava, untested logic, akara parivataka, or aligning with personal views, daihi nisaya. I've seen this in American Buddhist circles. Folks cherry-pick teachings that fit their worldview, ignoring the hard stuff like renunciation. The Buddha's antidote? Don't just believe, practice. Test it. I've watched a New York lawyer at a retreat argue endlessly about karma's logic, citing books, never sitting still. Day 8, he meditated for an hour. Day 9, he wept at the silence he'd never known. That's the shift from head to heart, from theory to reality. So, I ask you, How many of your beliefs are borrowed and how many have you forged in the fire of practice? Now, let's push this deeper with a question that might sting. What if your faith is just a shadow of someone else's truth, not your own? Here's where the Buddha's genius cuts like a blade. He didn't want parrots, he wanted practitioners. Consider his analogy of the statue in the darkness, a teaching that hit me like thunder decades ago. Picture this. Two friends stand in a pitch-black forest. A lightning flash illuminates a statue for one but not the other. The one who saw it knows it's there. The other must trust his friend's word. That's faith in Buddhism, starting with trust in the Buddha's vision of liberation, but striving to see it for yourself. I recall a retreat in California, where a young mother, drowning in grief after losing her child, came seeking answers. She hadn't seen peace, she only had my word and the Buddhist teachings. But through daily mindfulness, tracking every tear and breath, she glimpsed a stillness beneath the pain, not a cure but a space to breathe. That's her lightning flash, her step toward experiential faith. The Buddha told the Kalamas, don't go by reports, tradition, or scripture. Test it with wise reflection and practice. I've lived this myself, sitting through nights of doubt in my 60s, wondering if nirvana was just a fairy tale. But each meditation, each act of letting go, lit a tiny flash, enough to keep going. Research backs this too. A 2017 study in the Journal of Buddhist Ethics found that 78% of Western Buddhists reported stronger faith after consistent meditation, not from reading sutras, but from direct experience. Faith isn't handed to you, it's built, brick by brick, through sweat and silence. So, what have you seen in your own darkness? What flashes of truth keep you on this path? Let's hit the peak of this journey, the heart of why faith matters, with a story that still shakes me. Meet Thomas, a grizzled veteran I met at a retreat in Colorado. He'd seen war, lost comrades, carried PTSD like a second skin. He stumbled into Buddhism not for faith, but for survival. Therapy hadn't touched his nightmares. Thomas started with zero trust, mocking the idea of enlightenment as hippie nonsense. But he sat day after day following the breath as I guided him, not because he believed but because he was desperate. Week 3, during a walking meditation, he froze mid-step, tears streaming as he described a sudden quiet in his mind, a split second where the screams of memory didn't reach. That was his statue in the dark, his first glimpse. Over 2 years, his faith grew, not in a deity but in the Dhamma's power to ease suffering. He'd recite the Buddha's words to me, "He who has faith and wisdom yoked together will attain the highest goal." Thomas's journals, which he shared, detailed 300+ meditation sessions, each a battle with doubt, each building trust in the path. This mirrors what the Buddha taught in the Samyutta Nikaya. Faith is the seed, but practice waters it. A 2020 survey by the Pew Research Center noted 62% of American Buddhists initially struggled with faith, yet 85% of long-term practitioners reported confidence in the teachings after consistent practice. Thomas's story isn't unique. I've guided dozens like him in Europe, from London to Lisbon, watching faith emerge not from sermons, but from raw, personal struggle. The Buddha's path isn't about blind leaps. It's about stepping into the dark until you see for yourself. Faith, then, is your torch, but you've got to strike the flint. What darkness are you stepping into, and what's lighting your way? Now, let's ease into something softer, a poetic nudge from the Buddha himself that still warms my old bones. He once likened faith to a seed, saying, "Faith is the seed, austerity the rain, wisdom my yoke and plow, moral shame my pole, mind my strap, mindfulness my plowshare and goad." Imagine that, a tiny seed of trust, buried in the soil of your heart, waiting for the rain of effort to make it sprout. I picture this every spring in my garden, planting literal seeds, chuckling at how my shaky hands mirror my early shaky faith. Back in the 80s, I was a mess, divorced, broke, lost in a bottle, when a friend dragged me to a Dhamma talk in Manchester. I didn't believe a word. Nirvana sounded like a scam. But that seed of curiosity, that faint what if, got me sitting for 5 minutes a day. Austerity, cutting booze, facing my mess, was the rain. Mindfulness, watching my rage without reacting, was the plow. Decades later, I'm not enlightened, but I've got a harvest of calm I never dreamed possible. I've shared this verse with groups in Seattle, watching eyes light up as they grasp it. Faith isn't a gift, it's a garden you tend. Picture yourself now holding that seed. Maybe it's a flicker of hope after a brutal year, or a quiet trust in meditation's promise. You've got to water it, plow through doubts, guard it with mindfulness. I've seen a young artist in Paris paint this metaphor, a seed cracking open under rain, roots gripping soil, hanging it above her altar as a reminder. The Buddhist poetry isn't just pretty, it's a blueprint. So laugh with me at life's mud, grab your plow, plant that seed, and let's see what grows. What's one small step you could take today to water your faith? To wrap this up, let's boil it down. Faith in Buddhism isn't blind belief, it's experiential confidence, forged in the heat of practice, mindfulness, and personal truth. It's not about trusting words, it's about testing the path until you see your own lightning flash. I've walked this road for decades, seen it transform cynics into seekers, and felt it steady my own trembling heart. So start where you are, sit, breathe, question, and let your faith grow from what you discover. If you found value in this journey, please like, subscribe, and stick around for more stories. These actions fuel my drive to share the Dhamma. And I'd love to hear from you. What's one moment in your practice that sparked a flicker of trust in this path? Drop it below. Let's keep this conversation alive. Nam Buddhaya.